The overhead bins rattled as turbulence shook the plane, but the real storm wasn't outside. It was in row 27. A man in a faded hoodie sat squeezed into the cramped economy seat. His little daughter curled against him, clutching a stuffed rabbit with frayed ears. Passengers around him snickered, some whispering about his worn shoes, others rolling their eyes when he softly sang to calm his child. To them, he looked like a broke, struggling single dad who didn't belong on the same flight as them. But 10 minutes later, when the intercom crackled and the flight attendants suddenly snapped to attention, jaws dropped. The man everyone laughed at was addressed with one word. Sir, before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. Daddy, I'm scared, whispered Emily, the little girl with tangled blonde curls. She couldn't have been older than 7, her voice trembling as the plane shook again. I've got you, sweetheart, her father murmured, pressing a reassuring kiss to her forehead. His name was Daniel Hayes, a 35-year-old single dad whose eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights and endless sacrifices. He tucked the rabbit under her chin and whispered, "Remember what I told you? Brave like the rabbit." Passengers in the row ahead snorted. A woman in pearls muttered just loud enough for others to hear, "Economy's full of people who shouldn't even be flying." Her husband chuckled, "Probably spent his last dime on this ticket. Look at those beat-up boots." Daniel heard every word, but stayed quiet. His calloused hands tightened on the armrest. He wasn't here for their approval. He was here because Emily had begged to see the ocean for the first time. The turbulence passed, but tension didn't. The whispers and sideways glances lingered. One young man across the aisle even pulled out his phone, recording as if Daniel were some joke to post online. Then everything shifted. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor systems issue. Please remain calm. Flight crew, standard protocol." The plane jolted, lights flickering. A nervous gasp swept through the cabin. The same passengers who mocked Daniel minutes earlier now gripped their seats in fear. Emily whimpered, burying her face in his chest. Daniel didn't panic. He straightened, scanning the cabin with a sharpness that made him look like an entirely different man. His calm presence contrasted with the growing hysteria around him. That's when a flight attendant rushed down the aisle, eyes wide, speaking urgently into her radio. Her gaze landed on Daniel. She froze. Then, like a switch flipped, her entire posture changed. She stood straighter, saluted subtly, and said with crisp precision, "Sir, we may need your guidance." Every head snapped toward him. Passengers blinked, confused. The same man they'd mocked for his cheap hoodie and scuffed boots was suddenly being addressed with a word that carried authority. "Sir," someone whispered. Daniel gave Emily's hand a squeeze before meeting the attendant's eyes. His voice was steady, firm, unshakable. "Show me what's happening." The cabin fell into stunned silence. The aisle went quiet enough that even the hum of the engine sounded menacing. Passengers leaned sideways in their seats, phones forgotten, eyes locked on Daniel. A moment ago, he was the man everyone dismissed. Now the flight attendant stood at attention, as if she'd just reported to a commanding officer. Emily peeked up at her father with wide, questioning eyes. "Daddy, what's happening?" Daniel brushed his hand over her hair and gave her a steady smile. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. Stay brave like we said." His voice was calm for her sake, but his gaze had hardened. The attendant's voice wavered. "Sir, the captain requested you at the front. He said if you're on board, protocol says—" She stopped herself, realizing she had already revealed too much. The pearls and diamonds woman from earlier sat up straighter, her lips parted in shock. "Protocol? What protocol? Who is he?" Her husband whispered something that sounded like military, but no one knew for sure. Daniel didn't waste time. He stood, slipping Emily's stuffed rabbit into her lap. "Hold this for me," he told her softly. "Remember, it's brave, just like you." Her small fingers clenched the toy as if it were a lifeline. The moment Daniel stepped into the aisle, the other attendants straightened, their voices dropping into a professional register that hadn't been there before. One even said under her breath, "Sir, welcome aboard." The same word again, "Sir." Daniel followed them toward the cockpit. The mocking passengers craned their necks, their laughter gone. Fear had erased their smugness. At the cockpit door, the captain turned, relief flashing across his face when he saw him. "Major Hayes," he said quietly. "Didn't know you were flying today." A collective gasp rose behind him. Major. Daniel's jaw flexed. He hadn't heard that title in years. "What's the situation?" The captain explained quickly. An electrical fault had knocked out a secondary navigation system. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to cause panic if it spread. "Passengers don't know the details yet," the captain said. "But when the system flickered, some of the crew panicked. Having you here, it changes things. You know that." Daniel nodded. He had spent 15 years in the Air Force, flying missions most people would never hear about. To the world, he was just a single dad in a hoodie. To the flight crew, he was still Major Hayes, the man who'd once coordinated emergency landings in hostile skies. "I'll calm the cabin," Daniel said. "But I want updates every 5 minutes. Understood?" "Yes, sir," the captain answered instantly. As Daniel turned back toward economy, his boots echoed against the aisle floor. Dozens of eyes stared at him, some in awe, others in guilt. The man in the designer's suit who had laughed at him earlier dropped his gaze, embarrassed. The young guy who had been recording quickly stuffed his phone into his pocket. Daniel stopped in the middle of the aisle. His voice carried, low, calm, firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. Everything is under control. The crew is following protocol, and I'm here to make sure you're safe. So breathe. Hold your loved ones close, and stop panicking. It helps no one." The authority in his tone left no room for argument. Even the crying toddler 2 rows back quieted, as if the steadiness of his words had soothed her. Daniel returned to Emily's side, sliding into his seat. She immediately grabbed his hand. "Are we okay?" she whispered. "Yes," he said. And then he smiled, softer this time. "But we're going to do something kind while everyone's scared. You see the little boy over there?" Emily followed his gaze to a boy about her age, cheeks wet with tears, clutching his video game console like it was a shield. His mother was whispering frantically to him, clearly terrified herself. Emily nodded. "Why don't you share Brave Rabbit with him for a little while?" Daniel suggested. "You know how it helped you. Maybe it can help him too." Her lips pressed together. Brave Rabbit was her most prized possession. But she looked at the boy again, his sobs shaking his shoulders, and slowly stood. She crossed the aisle and placed the rabbit gently in his lap. The boy's tears slowed. He looked at her with wide, grateful eyes before hugging the toy. The mother mouthed, "Thank you," her eyes glistening. That single act of kindness spread like a ripple through the cabin. Passengers who had moments ago sneered at Daniel and Emily now sat in silence, shame tugging at their expressions. A few even shifted uncomfortably, realizing how cruel their earlier whispers had been. Daniel's steady presence turned the fear into something else. Respect. One man broke the silence. The same young passenger who had been recording cleared his throat and said awkwardly, "Sorry, sir," for earlier. His face burned with embarrassment. Daniel only nodded, not gloating, not angry, just calm. Focus on what matters. Everyone's safety. Minutes stretched. The plane jolted again, but this time, no one screamed. They looked to Daniel, and when they saw he didn't flinch, they steadied themselves too. Another attendant approached quietly, kneeling beside his row. "Sir, the captain says the system stabilized. He thanks you for being here." Daniel inclined his head. He didn't need thanks. He only needed his daughter safe. But when he glanced down, Emily wasn't just safe. She was smiling. She watched the little boy clutching Brave Rabbit, his sobs gone. And for the first time that flight, her own fear had vanished. Passengers began murmuring apologies, some even offering snacks or water, trying to bridge the gap of the cruelty they had shown earlier. Daniel accepted none of it, but his silence was enough. The woman in pearls finally spoke, her voice low, almost broken. "I judged you. I thought you didn't belong here. I was wrong." Daniel turned his head, his eyes steady. "Everyone belongs here. Remember that." The weight of his words sank in deeper than any lecture could have. By the time the captain announced they would be landing shortly, the cabin atmosphere had transformed. Fear was gone. Laughter had not returned. But respect had taken its place. And it all centered on the man in row 27. The same man they mocked. The same man they underestimated. The single dad they called less than. But now, every passenger on that plane looked at him differently, because they knew one truth. He wasn't just Daniel Hayes. He was Major Hayes, and he had shown them what true strength and kindness looked like. The seatbelt sign chimed as the captain's voice came over the intercom, calmer now, steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've stabilized our systems and are preparing for descent. Please remain seated as we begin our approach, and we'd like to extend our gratitude to a very special passenger today." "Thank you, sir." The cabin buzzed. Eyes darted toward Daniel. People whispered, some in awe, some in disbelief. Emily tugged her father's sleeve. "Daddy, why did he thank you in front of everyone?" Daniel looked down at her, his lips pressing into a small smile. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, doing the right thing matters more than what anyone thinks of you. Even if no one notices, eventually, the truth comes out." Her eyes sparkled with pride. "You're my hero." Those words pierced him deeper than any salute or title ever had. He swallowed the lump in his throat and brushed her curls back. "And you're mine." The plane tilted into descent. Outside the windows, streaks of gold broke through the clouds, sunlight painting the wings in firelight. But inside, the atmosphere was heavier. No more laughter at Daniel's expense, no more sneers at his worn boots. Instead, there was a silent, collective recognition. The young man who had tried to record him earlier now sat with his head bowed, ashamed. The woman in pearls fiddled with her necklace, unable to meet his eyes. Even the college kid who had mocked Emily's rabbit earlier now leaned forward, whispering gently to the little boy who still clutched the toy. And then, it happened. As the wheels touched the runway, jolting the cabin, The flight attendants unbuckled early. Against protocol, they walked briskly down the aisle, every single one of them, until they stood at row 27. They didn't just glance at Daniel. They stood tall, heels clicking, shoulders squared, and in unison, they nodded. "Thank you, sir." The words echoed in the hushed cabin. Passengers gasped softly. Some clapped instinctively, though the applause quickly faded into something more reverent. Silence, heavy with respect. Daniel didn't grandstand. He simply inclined his head, acknowledging them, then turned back to Emily, tightening his arm around her small shoulders. The captain's voice followed through the intercom. "To those of you wondering, Major Hayes served this country for over 15 years. Many of the protocols we follow on flights today were shaped by men like him. His presence today was no accident. It was providence." A stunned hush swept through the passengers. Major Hayes. The truth was out. Emily blinked, processing the words. "So, you used to fly airplanes too?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Something like that, sweetheart." When the plane finally rolled to a stop at the gate, the usual mad rush to grab bags didn't happen. People stayed seated, stealing glances at the quiet man in the hoodie and the little girl with the frayed rabbit. It wasn't fear holding them back. It was reverence. As they filed out, some paused. The man in the designer suit who had mocked Daniel first cleared his throat. "Sir, I owe you an apology. I judged you, and I was wrong." "Thank you," Daniel met his eyes with calm steadiness. "Be better to the next person you see who looks like me. That'll mean more than an apology." The man nodded, his face flushed, and moved on. The woman in pearls stopped too, her voice softer than before. "Your daughter. She's lucky to have you. I wish I'd seen it sooner." Daniel gave a polite nod but said nothing. He didn't need their validation. Emily's smile was all that mattered. At the gate, as the crew saluted him one last time, Daniel bent down and whispered in his daughter's ear, "See? Brave Rabbit helped more than just you today." She grinned, her missing front tooth making her look even braver than she realized. They stepped into the terminal, just a dad and his daughter again. To most, they looked ordinary. But to everyone on that plane, they would never look ordinary again. And as they walked away, Daniel carried with him the quiet satisfaction of a truth he had always known. Kindness and strength don't need applause. Real respect comes not from titles or uniforms, but from how you carry yourself when the world underestimates you. On that flight, Daniel Hayes reminded everyone of that lesson. But to Emily, he wasn't Major Hayes. He was simply Dad. And that was the only title he ever truly needed.